Welcome to Leadership Bites with myself, your host, Guy Bloom. This is a leadership podcast where I have conversations with colleagues, I chat with guests, and sometimes there'll be just me talking. You can connect with me at livingbrave.com, and when you enjoy the episode, subscribe and please tell everyone. Emma, it is absolutely wonderful to have you on this episode of Leadership Bites. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Didn't we do well there? And listen, I've reached out to you via the powers of LinkedIn, and I must be a walking advertisement for LinkedIn because all of this entire podcast is due to LinkedIn. But I reached out. I was looking at what you were doing. I was seeing the posts. I was hooked quite quickly by what I thought or understood it to be. And so I know who you are. And on the audio podcast, I've done a bit of a description. On the video one, I don't do that. So just for people that don't know who you are, who are you and what are you doing?
So my name's Emma. I am the founder of a not-for-profit recruitment consultancy called Radical Recruit. So who am I? I am a person who has worked in what I call the human services sector for about 15 years. So working with individuals and groups of people who are essentially marginalised, disenfranchised, and kept on the outskirts of our society because of the systems and the structures that exist within it. I guess, I work with the underdog, if you like, and I started my career in disability, and I've worked with lots of different constituencies who are underrepresented in lots of ways, but in particular within the labour market. And before I founded Radical Recruit, I was working for an organisation that supported women who were coming out of the criminal justice system to find jobs on release. So there's about 5,000 women in prison every year compared to 90,000 men. And across the board, 80% of them are released without jobs and are often also homeless. And during my time there, I was there for about 22 months, I think, and I had the privilege and the honour of supporting just over 400 women to find jobs on release and reintegrate within society, re-establish themselves as within their sort of family units and become better citizens, whatever that looks like. And I was talking towards the end of my tenure, I was talking at the Reward Gateway NX Summit, which was the most amazing conference I've ever been to. It was themed HR Rebels, and I was invited to talk on a panel with my then candidate, Chanel, who's actually about to become my trustee, and the head of people from Honest Burgers. And we were all telling Chanel's story from our different perspectives. Chanel she was one of 16 siblings, born into generational poverty, young, black, West Midlands based. Her father was and still is a prolific drug lord. She was taken into care when she was very young. And as soon as she was old enough, she went to prison to a Young Offenders Institute, and then she was transferred into HMP Downview, which is a women's prison in Surrey. And when I met Chanel, it was in my first week, and I was tasked with the job of calling her from prison to understand who she was, what she'd done previously, and what she wanted to do, with a view to sort of developing a CV for her, because she was due for release 2 weeks later. And I discovered all these things about her, but also I discovered that she was this amazing baker and she loved food, and that she'd actually founded a catering business within the prison called Down the Cake Hole. So I don't know, have you ever been to a prison before? No, never been in, never visited anyone. Well, for anyone who has, they will all tell you the same thing. It's really, really hard to do anything beyond the usual regime. So the fact that she had founded this business, she trained up 2 lifers to take over the management of the business, and she'd been catering for the governor inside and outside all of his events. meant that she was like this amazingly savvy person who could negotiate, who could network, who could, make things happen. And I was just incredibly impressed by her determination and her get up and go and things like that. And I didn't know her from a bar of soap, but I felt like she had left sort of her life of crime and all of the things that she'd been born into behind her, and she was ready for a new start. Anyway, we blagged this CV for her and called up Honest Burgers and said, please, can you come and interview her before she gets released, because she's going to be released homeless and without a job. And they came to the prison, and the person that interviewed her tasted a piece of her carrot cake, and he said it was the best damn carrot cake he'd ever tasted, and gave her a job on the spot.
Boom.
Anyway, we're at this conference telling Chanel's story, and I realised for the first time in the 2 years that I'd worked for that particular employer that the appetite for social recruitment had changed. And I'd pitched a room of corporates who seemed to be interested in Chanel's story and were wanting to learn more about how they could potentially replicate this model within their own workplaces. And I'd realised that, like, Chanel was saying things like, for the first time in my life, I feel valued, I feel safe, I'm contributing, I haven't reoffended, all these things like we take for granted. And I was like, bloody hell. All it took was literally 20 minutes on the phone to me, one meeting with an inclusive employer and a piece of carrot cake. And this woman had transformed her life. So at that point, she'd been out of prison for 18 months. She started as the dish pig, and she was training to become a head chef. I was just like, if this works for someone like Chanel, like the odds were stacked up against her. On paper, she should probably never have been even alive at that point. Why couldn't it work for other people with other sort of barriers to work or who had similar experiences to Chanel? So that's kind of how Radical was born. We're a not-for-profit recruitment consultancy. We represent London's hidden talent, and they're typically people with barriers to work. So they're people who've had contact with the criminal justice system, have been brought up in care, who are sort of at imminent risk of or currently homeless. We work with individuals from sort of deprived geographical locations. Typically, they're from BAME backgrounds. We work with people with disabilities, victims of modern slavery, people in recovery, domestic violence survivors, really anyone who struggles to get a foot in the door of the corporate world, really, we work with. And in addition to sort of supporting them with the recruitment piece, we also get them work ready so that they can compete on an even footing with their mainstream counterparts.
Yeah.
So that was sort of how we were born. Long answer, I know.
Well, it's a long answer, but it's a bloody good one. That's a beautiful thing.
Chanel is just one of these people that, she really propelled me into action. She's so, like, she was talking to an audience of, 100 people she'd never met. And she was so courageously and bravely telling her story, but also advocating for other people who've been born into tumultuous circumstances who really didn't ever get an opportunity just to even start in life, and also sort of trying to convince people of the merits of giving people who've made mistakes another chance to be better.
Yeah.
Which is, she ticks sort of both boxes. And the fact that she's got from where she was born into to where she is now is just a testament to her resilience and her determination and grit. She's just remarkable.
So, on that note, just do one little thing for me. You're on a laptop, right? Just
I am.
Pull it down slightly just so I can see. That's it. Beautiful. Just so I've got... Yeah, exactly. Yeah, whatever's in the front. Don't worry about that. That's perfect. Because I know this is so powerful for me that I just want to maximize it for everybody. On a slightly separate note, do you think she'd be up for an episode, just her and me? Yeah, we could pick up on her story, and maybe that's something we could. Yeah,
I'd love to do that. I'm sure she'd make a great guest. Great. Far more interesting than me.
Absolutely not true, but that's okay. And I'd expect you to have probably said that. So, Emma, I can feel that in you. It's coming. It's. I'm feeling it from a long way away. That connection and what that means to you, probably emotionally as well. I'm a big believer in understanding somebody's journey in life to add value to what it is that they have to say. And, we're on a podcast, so I'd like to say it's just you and me, but it's you and me and everybody else, right? But just what's your journey that's taken you to a place where you are doing something that intellectually most people might go, oh, yes, I'd love to do something like that, but they're probably not going to. So what is it that's your driving force? It'd be interesting to hear how you got to this space and maybe some of the drivers that go with that.
Yeah, I think there are a couple of things worth mentioning. So I was born into incredible privilege. I had, two parents who loved each other and loved me and my little brother. I always had, we didn't have a lot of money, but my father always had work. My mother had the option to be a stay-at-home mum, and I was always cared for. I always had food on my on the table. I always had sort of clothes on my back. My only priority as a child was to get an education. I wasn't even allowed to get a job when I was 16. So I think I was made aware of that at a really young age because my mother was the youngest of 7 and born into generational poverty, and in stark contrast to my father, who wasn't. At my house, when I was young and growing up, we had this open door policy, and Mum would invite anyone into the house that needed love or educating or feeding or housing. So we always had the strays, the kids with parents who perhaps weren't being the best parents or what, I don't know how to term it, but so there was always, I was brought up knowing that that's how we treat each other. That's that humans are humans, doesn't matter where you come from. Everyone deserves to feel safe, to feel like they belong, to have love in their life, blah, blah, blah. And my dad would feed them. My dad would do all the feeding, Mum do everything else.
And can I just ask something? Not to interrupt you, but to help me make sense of it, which is that language that you're using, that we take care of people. Was that conversations you were having, or is it something that you've just observed?
No, this is how I was raised. This is.
So you were being told this is what we do? No,
that was my experience. Right. That was my life. And that was the expectation. There was always, we didn't talk about, race, and we didn't talk about sexual preference, and we just respect people no matter who they are, where they come from. So that was inherent in everything that my family did, all of their behaviors, our actions as a group, blah, blah, blah. So I've always sort of had that. They I guess, formed my values and my beliefs growing up as an adult. And then I kind of fell into disability, and all of that became my work life as well. So it was managing sort of programs and accommodation services and things like that for people with sensory impairment, then brain injury and drugs and alcohol involved. And so I guess that's sort of how it all started. They say care runs in the family. My mum, when she wasn't sort of caring for us as children, or the neighbourhood kids that needed caring for, she worked in disability as well, and then she became a teacher's aide, and now she's a teacher. So These are all sort of caring professions. I think it's just it runs in the blood. So I guess that was that's how it started for me. I've worked in the charity sector for 15 years. One of the things that I have always found really frustrating is the fact that charities are expected to sit in the corner and behave like good women, legs crossed, speak when spoken to, never too loud, these types of things. But when you're representing people who are undervalued by society, or who, are perceived through a lens of mistrust, or are perceived as sort of lacking motivation or incapable of getting jobs, whatever it is. Like if you look at homeless people, you know, the first thing you think about is that they must be a drug user, you know, these types of things. So when you're representing people who are sort of in the outskirts of society, at the absolute fringes, you can't, as an organisation, sit in the corner and be quiet and act like a good lady. So, and I felt like throughout my career, that has been a requirement, regardless of the level of the role that I had within any of the organisations. It's always been like, you must behave in a certain way. And I kind of feel like if you're representing the people that we represent at Radical, you have to be bold, you have to be unapologetic, you have to challenge the status quo. And I couldn't do that in my previous role. So that was, I guess, one of the catalysts. And that conference, you know, it was just, I went to the pub afterwards, and at that time I wasn't one for sort of self-reflection. And I felt the need to. When I went to the local pub afterwards, ordered a really big glass of red wine, and I wrote down all of my thoughts. And those thoughts sort of formed what is now my manifesto at Radical. And, you know, they're the beliefs and the things that really underpin all of our work. And it's essentially that it was a bit of like a Martin Luther, I have a dream kind of moment for me. But essentially what I believe is that everyone should have the right to a great job that they love, that provides opportunities for progression. And lots of people don't have that. And, you know, if you look at like recruitment consultancies, there's over 30,000 registered as trading in the UK. They remain largely inaccessible to people with disabilities, to people with convictions, to people who don't have the confidence to walk into the Office Angels or the Reed and sell themselves to a recruiter. You know, if you don't have an ATS optimized CV, it doesn't even get to the recruiter. So for me, like Radical, one of the catalysts was actually believing that everyone should have access to a really great recruitment consultancy and that service, because that opens up so many doors, doesn't it? Mm. So they're the three things I think that really.
So this conference, what was in it that triggered what was obviously inside of you, you know, but what was it that triggered that? What were you seeing or hearing?
It was Chanel saying, it was a realization that Chanel was probably one of the most complex people that I'd ever worked with. Okay. And with the tiniest amount of support at the right time, she completely changed the trajectory of her life. So Chanel was in prison. I think it was a 6-year sentence she got just before on her last custodial, and she'd done 3 years of it. So her crimes were pretty serious. And just to be given one opportunity meant that she didn't go back to her family that were unhealthy for her, that put her in harm's way and had always done. And it meant that she could get accommodation. It meant that she was now feeling part of a community. She was paying her taxes.
So it was seeing that the reality of that got you.
Yeah. And I was like, oh my gosh, if this works for someone like Chanel, why can't it work for the male estate? Why can't it work for people with disabilities? Why can't it work for, you know, young people who are born into care, these types of things? So I guess that was it really. And there was a real buzz in the air. Like people were really, it felt like social recruitment was less sort of fashionable and more something that people could understand might drive business success, that diversity was more than just sort of this, you know, rhetoric, sort of 3-hour box ticking training exercise once a year, if that makes sense. It felt like things had shifted.
So how do you then go from a big glass of red wine and an epiphany to actually setting up a business and how do you make the contacts? How do you know where to go? How much of this is because you know people or Google search engines, or how did that first 12 months look?
The first 12 months, I wasn't even thinking about the first 12 months. So I rather naively admitted that my plans to my employer, and they terminated my contract on breach of contract. So that's probably was a
mental note to self.
Yeah, don't be honest. That's right. I got the sack for the first time in my life, and I was like, in the depths of despair for a moment or two. And I was speaking to my mother and she was just like, just do it, Emma. So I had this grand plan that I would, while Mum was paying my rent and my grocery bill, that I would.
God bless her.
Yeah, my mum's the best woman in the whole entire world. I don't care what anyone says. She's just the most generous person. But she really believes in what I believe in. I'd been talking about this for a while and she was just like, just do it. And I was like in two minds. I was like, shit, I've literally just given up this cushy job that paid, relatively well. That meant I had a comfortable lifestyle. I was a COO at the time. So, all of these, it was comfortable to go and then try this sort of concept that hadn't really been proven previously and by myself with no money. So what did I do? I actually put an ad on like a free in London sort of Facebook group for consultancy services. And I said, I want to meet people from these constituencies, care leavers, ex-offenders, homeless people, because they were the three groups that I was really interested in. And often they're the same people at different points of their life journey. And a young man called Michael, who is one of my advisors now, contacted me, and he too was in the depths of despair. He was emotionally not very well and physically not very well, long-term unemployed, a care leaver, had been homeless, and just really, really struggling, didn't have a lot of hope for his future, just nothing in his life. There was nothing positive. He didn't have anything to look forward to, and he didn't have any support around him, and he was really having a tough time. Anyway, he responded to this ad and he said, I need a job. And so we had a good old chat, like 2 hours, I think we spoke on the phone. And I discovered he was just an amazing performance artist. He writes spoken word. He was really active in the care leaver community, advocating for young people who had sort of also shared experience of care, and perfectly employable, but just didn't have a CV that marketed his skills and didn't have anyone that really believed in him. So that's kind of how it started. I started off with Michael and I placed him, and then he told his friend Sade, and then I placed her. And then before I knew it, I sort of made 10 placements and then 20 placements, and we're on over 85 now, 14 months later. So that's how it started. And literally I kind of started talking on LinkedIn and networking. I mean, I was touring other charitable organisations, pitching my service, saying, refer your people to me, I'm going to get them jobs. Like there was no plan. Like in an ideal world, I would have made 10 placements, proven the concept, and then gone to a funder like Big Lottery or the Oak Foundation, Tudor Trust, and said, this model works, give me money, let's scale up together. But Brexit happened, and then the election happened, and Christmas, and now the plague. And, my plan went straight out the window. But we've got a team of 5 currently, and we've made over 85 placements. I think we're on 86 or 87. I'm not entirely sure. And we've placed some amazing people into some great jobs. And we're actually seeing a year on, like Michael's just been promoted. So there's like people are sort of moving and progressing within their chosen careers, which is a beautiful thing. And I'm working with just the most amazing people, and we've just been funded by the biggest funder there is, the Ministry of Communities, Housing and Local Government. Might be the other way around. I'm not sure how the acronym is. And we're working with rough sleepers that have been temporarily housed on account of COVID, and we're getting them jobs. And it's just, there was no plan really. There still isn't a plan. We've got a strategy meeting tomorrow because year 2 needs to be more organised than year 1.
Okay.
Put it that way.
Yeah. If this thing's going to keep rolling, then yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's amazing. I was begging businesses for their vacancies, and I was doing it for free. We've just signed Warner Brothers. We work with Mighty. We work with Compass Group. We've got some big, high street brands that have approached us, which is a testament to the calibre of the people that we're representing. and the hard work the team have put in over the last 12 months to build our brand and prove the model. So, yeah, things have really changed over the last 12 months. I'm very proud. It's a lot of information.
It makes me pause. It's very powerful to hear somebody talk about something that they're passionate about, but also adds value to the world. You know, we often try and there's lots of people that work in roles where there's a product or a service, and you know, they're very proud of it and they're genuine people working incredibly hard, but the product or the service is relatively benign. You know, if it's hubcaps or something like that for car wheels, it's the product itself isn't per se doing something. So to hear somebody talk about something that is having a definitive effect, I think is hugely powerful. Has social media been the key to being heard?
100%. I don't have a marketing budget. So, I mean, we rely on, I think that the biggest barrier to our people finding work is the public's perceptions of them. And when I was really green, I was trying to change people's minds. And what I realized
12 months ago.
Yeah. Really. I was sort of on this mission to change everyone's mind, which in hindsight is incredibly naive. It's a lot easier to add to people's perceptions. And I think the best way to do that is to prove that one person and one job at a time, that homeless people, that ex-offenders, that young people, all of these people that are sort of viewed through a lens of mistrust or perceived to be antisocial, who assumed to not have sort of the skills or the qualities required to sustain work or get it in the first place, do actually make valuable members of staff and also the community. And so I do a lot of storytelling on LinkedIn because it's cheap. Well, it's free actually. Yeah. And people love a good news story.
And I saw it. I see a photo of a beaming face and
yeah.
With it, and I'm in, you know.
Yeah. I mean, I'm no influencer or anything like that, but I mean, a good post, you can get sort of 40, 50,000 views.
There's two things there. One, you may not be an influencer, but you definitely have influence. And getting 40 to 50,000 views with what LinkedIn's just done to the algorithm recently, which is to reduce people's scope and scale because they want people to advertise.
Yes,
that's massive.
Well, I mean, it's a story itself that's massive. I mean, I'm thinking about.
Well, no, the fact that reach, it tells you the power of what you're offering, that it's still having that reach. It tells you how powerful it is.
Yeah. I mean, we do. So that's sort of my focus, and I think partly it's because I really enjoy writing the success stories. I think it's a beautiful thing to be able to celebrate someone's success, especially if they've come from like huge adversity, like many of our people have. So yeah, I do use I use LinkedIn as a way of obviously talking about what we do, but also engaging with a whole range of stakeholders, from referral partners who are working with potential radicals, I call my candidates radicals, or with the media, or with employers, and probably the most amazing people are my volunteers. So we've had over 300 volunteers support our work. And I found them all on LinkedIn, and they're typically recruiters or TA specialists of some description, and they are amazing. What does stand for? Talent acquisition.
Talent acquisition.
Yeah. And they do sort of what I call the grunt work. So we get them all in a Zoom room. Before the plague, it used to be in a community hall, and they'd come and use their corporate volunteering hours, and we'd all roll up our sleeves and really develop CVs and do mock interviews and teach them how to use the STAR technique to answer competency-based questions, all this sort of stuff. So, I mean, LinkedIn has been just an amazing vehicle for, one, telling our story, the radical story, celebrating the success of the people we support, championing like the great practice that's happening with our partners, because like it really does require. We only work with businesses who can sort of prove their D&I rhetoric is more than hot air. So we work with businesses who want to turn their rhetoric into action by recruiting sort of
So that's
hidden.
diversity and inclusion, right?
Yeah,
I'm just saying that for people that may not know the acronym.
Sorry, I assume everyone. This is like I eat D&I for breakfast. Yeah, so diversity and inclusion. Because I mean, you get lots of big businesses that say we're diverse and say we're inclusive, but actually, when you strip it all back, their policy doesn't translate into practice. And when you land on their website, the first picture you see is a big group of white middle-aged men as the executive management team, and you know, they're way off being diverse, they're way off being inclusive, and it really is hot air. So we work with all employers who...
It's an intellect, not an actuality, right?
Yeah. And it's a dishonest intellect as well. It's not, it's there's one thing to be seen to be diverse, but actually being diverse and ensuring like your people feel like they belong, they're completely different things. And I think like off the Black Lives Matter movement and the murder of George Floyd, you know, that has really brought diversity to the forefront again. And I'm seeing more action in addition to more talk, which is really heartening. I think like the pandemic has made businesses, given them the opportunity to stop and like pause and look inwardly and consider whether or not they're purpose-driven and what being purpose-driven might look like. And that really links in beautifully with radical as well, because we're all about people and diversity and inclusion.
There is something about one of the biggest things that's impacted is just working from home. And, you know, I keep joking about it, but, you know, that meme that went out that said, hey, you know, that job they said for the last 20 years that you can't do from home, it turns out you can.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think what that's done is woken business up to, we weren't trusting people, were we? But the moment we had to, it still worked.
Yeah.
So they've learned a lot about themselves very quickly, I think.
Absolutely. I think, and it's a big sign of poor leadership as well, not trusting your people. It's one of my bugbears. You know, there are 14 million people in the UK with a disability. Most of them are not working. And it's because employers aren't offering agile working arrangements. You know, one of my colleagues, Jürgen, he has been in recruitment and done account management for all the big brands for 15, 20 years. He lost his sight overnight last year. Really struggled to get a job because employers are terrified at the prospect of employing someone with a disability. They just don't know what to do. So that's when sort of enter radical. We support employers to think about what that might look like for their business and how they can become more inclusive. And again, going back to your point about sort of agile working or flexible working, that has opened up opportunities for parents, single parents, you know. It's opened up opportunities for people who really struggle to get on the tube because of their mental health. People with physical disability. Go ahead.
No, I was interrupting you. Go on, Emma. Go on.
No, I was finished. I mean, I'm just waffling.
Well, I was just thinking it's yeah, don't worry. Yeah, I was just saying stuff, but it's. I've got a little boy. I've got two boys, one 8 and 6, and one of them, the little one, has autism. You know, there's capital A autism, and there's sort of lesser versions of it. And you know, but he's there. He's stated we have some issues with him, and etc. But of course, very often these things only become real when you have the experience of it. It's very often, I mean, it's not that people can't make the association and have the empathy. That's not what I'm saying. But, you know, I have intellectual empathy, you know, as in, of course I understand. Oh, that's a terrible thing, you know, or, oh gosh, that must be very difficult. I'm not going to do anything about it, but I do recognize it. And then, of course, when something becomes real for me, I suddenly go, I wonder what's going to happen to him when he's 18.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I think
a reality for me.
Yeah, I think regardless of whether you have empathy for someone, as an employer, you have a legal obligation to everyone. And people with protected characteristics in particular. So when we're talking about people with disabilities, it doesn't actually matter whether you understand it or not. You have to make your workplace accessible. You have to ensure that they can participate in your recruitment process. So,
you see, I agree with you 100%. My and or my but or my however or whatever the right conjunction is there is that the intellectual, the servicing of the law will never be as genuine or as welcoming or as comfortable as an organization or a team or an individual that genuinely buys into it. So 100%. So I do buy into the fact that legally you have to, but nothing ever worked out well when the law was applied, right?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it doesn't, and often it does. I mean, I think that's 90% of the hard work we do. And again, it's about going back to that bit around sort of adding to people's perceptions and capacity building our employers. So we sort of do this radical ready test before we sign an employer, and we have conversations that are challenging, and we ask questions around accessibility and things like that. Because ultimately, you might have all the will in the world, but you're not set up to employ a radical person, a radical candidate. So when you do, that person's not likely to succeed in their role. So we do a lot of capacity building with our employers, and we offer sort of facilitation. So one of the things that we're offering at the moment is being consciously unbiased facilitation. And it's sort of a take on unconscious bias training, which generally, or has been in my experience, sort of an e-learning module that everyone has to do company-wide that's compulsory once a year, or like a 3-hour off-the-shelf session that you also have to do once a year. And sort of this tick box exercise. And there's a body of evidence to say that actually it doesn't change attitudes. But at Radical, we kind of feel like it's really important to be able to identify your bias, but businesses and individuals need to take that one step further by being consciously unbiased. So that's about changing behaviours.
So doing it on purpose.
Exactly.
Having the effort to say, right, what are we doing here? And
holding themselves accountable. And I kind of like, so we offer a half-day facilitation, and then we tail that with a half-day workshop. So the facilitation is all getting you thinking about what your implicit biases are, what your patterns of thinking are. We talk about diversity, because diversity, when you think about diversity, what's your definition of diversity? Give me an example.
This is a horrific moment, but I think the ability and the will to factor in difference.
Right. So when I ask this question of employers, I generally get the answer, well, diversity refers to people with disability. We talk about gender. We think about, sexual preference, religion, these types of things that are in theory protected by the law.
Yeah.
But if you think about diversity, if say diversity is a circle and you've got 3 rings within the circle, the diversity that we think about, the gender, race, disability, blah, 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 that's the center of the circle. And then on the next ring is external diversity. So it's things like where a person lives, their geographical location, their educational attainment, whether or not they grew up in care, whether they've been to prison, whether their parents, their accent.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. These things that are not protected by law, but actually, when it comes to, if we use recruitment as an example, are huge barriers to work. And then you've got organisational diversity that looks at like the seniority of the role that you hold. It might be the type of employer, these types of things. So when we do this facilitation, we explore what diversity is, and we prescribe to the 3-dimensional definition of diversity. And the idea behind the training is not to tell people that they're biased and that they should be better, but it's about facilitating thinking around their own biases and what they might want to do at work or in life in response to knowing these.
Well, you said that, you said earlier, don't try to change people's minds, add to their perceptions. So I can hear that that's what you're doing there.
Yeah. And by meeting people who are, so the second part of this facilitation is I put them all in a room with my radicals, and they're people that have been on the other side of their unconscious bias. And this facilitates a connection, and there's storytelling that happens.
There's something real and tangible in front of me that I can.
Exactly. And all of a sudden people care, because actually the people they're meeting are lovely humans,
of course,
and they've just had a tough time,
yeah,
or they've just been discriminated against. And all of a sudden.
And how would you have managed in that context? Would you have ended up half as good as this? Would you have taken a left instead of a right?
Exactly. So they do. So what we get them to do is a practical task, and it to the benefit of the radical, because I'm very efficient like that. So we get them to do either a coaching session. It could be teaching them how to develop a personal elevator pitch. It could be getting them on LinkedIn. It could be a CV review. It could be a mock interview, whatever. And then we debrief at the end, and we ask those questions, and we have those conversations. If you were this person, what would your life look like now? Or if you had this barrier when you were 16, if your mum left you and your dad was never in the picture and you were taken into care.
Or a drug lord.
Yeah, there you go. What would your life look the same? And all of a sudden, things that aren't really relevant to people like you and I, because we're incredibly privileged, become not relevant, but they're things that maybe relevant. I don't know what the word is.
What they're doing is they're experiencing a reality they've never had in front of them. They may have seen it on TV and they may have driven past it, but they haven't had the human being in front of them. And that
and this is the idea. So it's literally, and the conversations go, everywhere. Every session's different, and it really depends on who's in the room. But they're always really, like, you walk away, even as a facilitator, you walk away thinking, oh, God, I've learned something about myself, about the world, about other people. And what we do then is we ask people to sign up to be change makers in their workplace, and we give them practical tools that they can use and go and implement in their workplace. So it might be like, starting a D&I book club whereby a member of staff reads a piece of literature relating to a D&I topic, like white fragility, for example, and reports back what they've learned to the group. Or it could be that they put D&I on the senior leadership team meeting agendas, for example. Or it could be reviewing policy to ensure that the language we're using when we describe people with disabilities is inclusive. So these are the types of things. And then we check in with them once a quarter to keep them accountable and to share best practice and exchange ideas and support with other delegates from the same courses joining in. And so there's this sort of peer learning happening. And essentially it's to keep people accountable, because you can't just do a 3-hour session.
Would you offer that out to people that, as a training program to organisations, and which would maybe also be a revenue stream for you outside of sort of that?
Enough, we've had to look at what we can take to market. So a lot of the sort of capacity building, that getting employers radical ready stuff that we used to do for free, we've had to find a way to make money off, because my business model relied on pre-apocalypse charging for recruitment fees. Of course, no one's spending money on recruitment, and they're less likely to pay for an ex-offender candidate or a homeless candidate or whatever. So it's pretty tough. So, we do offer that. We've soft-launched it. We've not got loads of beautiful, sparkly marketing materials, but that too is on its way. And so we deliver that, and another session for corporates about it's called Leading Radical People. And basically we support people leaders, hiring managers to revisit the fundamentals, of leadership, like empathy and curiosity and adaptability and an active listening. And then we also introduce them to a trauma-informed approach, because most of the people that we work with at Radical have experienced some trauma in their lives. And I think that's probably true of the population of the world.
I think there's a lot of people who are functioning through by the time
trauma is not this thing
50,
that
something's happened to you probably.
Yeah, that's right. And I can't. It's what when I think back to the managers that I've had, they weren't managers, they were leaders, number one. They were empathetic always. They asked questions, they were curious, they cared, they were adaptable. But they also acknowledged that it's just a human at the end of the day. We all make mistakes, we all need support in different ways, these types of things. So it revisits all that. It provides sort of a level of supervision ongoing for people managers, so that when they're hiring our radicals, say, who are coming from, a homeless background, surviving the streets is bloody hard. It's traumatic. I mean, the things that these people have lived through.
But their adaptability, their tenacity, their problem solving.
Absolutely. They bring so much, that you cannot learn in a classroom.
Yeah.
You can't teach resilience.
Their situational sensing, their ability to kind of realise when an emotion has shifted. That's it may not be elegant, but it's in there. Yeah, absolutely.
And with the right leadership, the right support, delivered through a trauma-informed lens, these people can become assets. And like, if you think about like right now in this moment, who are the best people to have in your business? Ones that know Excel really well, or ones that can change and flex their approach and who don't shake easily? And, like, these are traumatic times, aren't they? They're hard times for everyone.
People are forged in fires. And I think if you've been through something of a level, then, it's the Crocodile Dundee kind of gag of, you think this is a knife. No, this is a knife. Well, this is traumatic. Oh, no. This is not traumatic, let me assure you. I've experienced traumatic. And so the level of their kind of capacity is greatly improved by the experience that a lot of people never
and they're things that you can't teach as well. So you might have the most, I can't think of a good university. I didn't go to university. Well, I did, but I didn't finish anything. What's the best university in the UK? Oxford. No, is that American?
Let's just say Oxford or Cambridge or something.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, so you can have a Cambridge grad who's had the best education, on paper looks fantastic, but actually anytime something changes within the business, or they're put in a pressurized situation when they have to think on their feet, or they come under fire because the stakeholder's not happy or whatever, their degree is not going to help them manage that situation.
Some organisations that have stopped hiring, we've got to have a first. We've got to have somebody from university. Actually, what we want is somebody, I think it's Google that have put programs online that have gone, look, rather than do your 3-year degree, complete these online courses and then come to us for an interview, because the reality is we want to hire the right human beings. And as long as you're of an intellectual capacity, we'll show you how to do it.
You can learn. Exactly. And everyone's capable of learning, aren't they?
Yeah. I mean, the 3-year degree and the merit that goes with a 3 or a 4 or whatever it is degree. I mean, if you're going to be a doctor, fine, I'd like you to understand medicine. But
that would be really nice, I think.
Yeah, that would be pretty handy. But there are certain things where you go, how does your, history degree help you, being an IT consultant or whatever it is? So that is fascinating. And I was just harking back to this question about diversity. I worked with an organisation that brought in a new head of leadership, and the first thing they asked me was, they said, Guy, you don't have a degree? And I was like, no, I don't know. Is that
that's bias? That's bias.
Yeah,
and that's that middle ring of diversity that we were talking about.
And the thing, and then as I got to know them, I said, as a matter of interest, if I came for a job, would you have given me the job? And they said, oh, no, I wouldn't have even seen you.
No.
Because your CV wouldn't have had a degree on, so I wouldn't have seen you. I said, just to be clear, you wouldn't have given me the job? No. Okay. Now, about a year later, when testimonials are coming in and I'm achieving certain things, it's, oh, yes, I'm really happy for you to, I like the fact that, I'm happy that you're in the role. I said, but interestingly enough, you're still not using anybody apart from me that doesn't have a degree.
Yeah.
So even though you have data in front of you that proves and evidences a new truth, you're still not shifting. And that was very interesting to me.
Well, it's interesting. infuriating. It's so commonplace.
Yes,
Guy
all of
can't
the
tell
above.
you. And it's like I have these conversations. I seem to get away with it. I think it's because I'm Australian and people just assume we're all really brash or whatever. But actually, they're infuriating, these conversations. I'm constantly saying, you are not being radical enough.
Yes.
You know, there's this body of evidence that says that diverse teams innovate better, they problem solve better, they affect your bottom line better, they drive business success.
But it's not
they're
as
more
comfortable
resilient to
and
crises.
it's not as easy to manage. It requires management competence. It requires emotional intelligence to manage.
I don't know. I think it requires people with power to give us some of their power away.
I agree, but that requires an emotional intelligence. That requires a willingness to control everything.
Yeah. I mean, I think there are plenty of emotionally intelligent people that understand the business case, the ethical case for operating business in this way. But what it would mean is less money. What it would mean is less power. What it would mean is less sway, less clout, whatever it is that they have that they're not prepared to give away. And it's, that is the way of the world, and we keep chipping away, organizations.
There is a rigidity as an organization gets larger that seems to inherently become true because the beast becomes less wieldy, so processes get put into place, and then there's a safety in fulfilling, if I do what I'm supposed to do, I can never really be at fault. So I apply the process, which then by definition creates a lack of tolerance for anything that's outside of the norm. So there is that. How do I bring the weight of the value of difference?
Yeah,
and that's an interesting. I could probably crack open a bottle of wine with you on that one and spend most of the evening on that topic.
And maybe some bread, because they're perfectly paired together. I think again, like we talk about this through our facilitation, it comes up, and I think you need if it's not being led by the top, and if the culture isn't there or whatever, you need people to champion it, and it needs to be relevant and they need to be equipped to sort of challenge the status quo, and they've got to have the right language, and they've got to make it everyone's business, like diversity, equality, inclusion, belonging. It has to be everyone's business. It can't just be a policy. It can't just be a strategy. Everyone has to be responsible for it. Otherwise, it doesn't work.
It feels very much like health and safety, which is when I work with construction companies and utilities companies, they look at health and safety fundamentally differently to office-based, non-construction orientated organizations, because health and safety is a thing, but when you're on site and people can not go home if it goes wrong, these people live and breathe health and safety. So it's beyond the tick boxing exercise. It's a definitive need. And
I've thought about this. I used to sit in these really, really boring board meetings, and I had the wonderful job of developing a what are they called? Risk register. Okay. So on this register, you've got health and safety, you've got finance, you've got blah blah blah, and that. No mention of health, no mention of diversity, equality, inclusion, belonging. Not even a sniff of it. So if we treated,
it's in the HR policy somewhere,
exactly the same way. If it were the responsibility of the board, and it was delegated to the executive, who delegated down, everyone had a job to ensure that from a risk perspective, D&I was on the agenda. It was built into, and your organisation's systems, structures, policies, processes. It was lived and breathed. It was important. It was as important as being financially viable. It's as important as being, having safe places for people to work. Then it would be we'd be having a completely different.
So this is the triple bottom line concept, right? Yeah. Commercials, culture, and sort of the and society. And I think the thing about something like health and safety is that senior group can be sued, and it doesn't matter how far away they are from the front line, they can go to jail. And, or, of course, that's one thing. So, hey, I'm definitely paying attention to that. And then for certain things, well, I get bonused on it.
Yes.
So, again, this comes down to people, risk and reward. If something's highly risky, I'm going to compensate. If something's highly rewarding, and if it's got to go into that until people just have an inherent will to do it, at the moment, it almost has to be put in to something that says if you don't do it, there's a risk, and if you do it, there's a reward. And I guess getting that onto the table. For example, I work with certain private equity-based organizations. So intellectually, they understand everything we're saying, and they all believe about getting the work done through people. But we're on a 3-year earnout here. So am I really going to take on some of the issues that are going to help the world, or am I going to make a shed load of money in the next 3 years? And that's really where my energy is going. So there's a lot of stuff going on there.
I mean, I think that the corporate world, the business community have huge power. I mean, if they all invested a tiny amount of money into a social cause, the world would be a far better place.
Yeah.
It would be a far more equitable place. The power of the corporate world cannot be understated. And actually, in times like these, its leadership is indispensable.
Yeah.
We while the corporate world have been furloughing themselves, the third sector have been powering on and supporting even more individuals who are now living in poverty just to survive every day. I visited a soup kitchen the other day. They feed 150 people 3 times a day, 6 days a week. They're located on Tottenham Court Road. They're powered by volunteers and donations. 100K from an organisation like, I don't know, BlackRock, someone,
Change
good
that.
old Larry's constantly talking about CSR and D&I and stuff like that. That would power them for a whole year.
Yeah.
And enable them to bring on some paid staff and really plan for the future. Like, it's just, doing good doesn't have to cost a lot of money either. If everyone threw a couple of grand in the pot, we could go for years and years and years, Radical, and put hundreds and hundreds of people into work. I spent less than 60 grand last year, and we put 80 people into work.
Well, I hope somebody hears this, and I'm sure they will. It's there's lots to be said. I'm super alert to time, Emma, because I have this absolute tendency just to want to keep talking and to go on. And people's tolerance for listening might outweigh my curiosity for talking to you. So,
I didn't have all the rubbish stuff as well, will you?
Well, the thing is, this has been. Well, I've loved this. I've loved hearing your passion. I've loved hearing your fluency on the topic, and people can be passionate and not well thought through. And you know what you're saying. You get it 100%, and you're doing it. You're not just theorizing. So it's incredibly powerful. So I'm going to bring us to a gentle close. I'm going to make sure that we stay in contact to see if maybe sometimes I think that. Yeah, there might be another podcast that can help or add value or whatever, but who knows? But just on a personal note, website, how would people make contact with you to see and to review what you're about? I'll put the links in the description anyway, but it'd be great just to hear that from you. Yeah,
so we have a website which is needs reviewing, but it's all very Martin Luther, I have a dream. So it's my manifestos on there, and it's not fit for purpose, but you can reach us there, and there's a contact form. That's www.radicalrecruit.co.uk. We're on LinkedIn, and if you want to treat yourself to a good news story, LinkedIn is the account to follow. We also are on Twitter and Instagram, and you can email us at hello@radicalrecruit.co.uk.
Okay, well, I'll put all of that in the description. So just on a personal note, thank you so much. I'm going to press the stop button in a moment, but I just want to say thank you so much for coming on this episode. Thanks for having me.
I always like our chats. Thank you.
I know, awesome, right?
Yeah.
Now let me try and stop it without making it all go horribly wrong. Bear with me.
Yeah, don't hit that delete button, else we're buggered.
I know. That's where I say, can we do it again? But there we go. Hold on. That's it, so I hope you enjoyed the episode. Please share so others get to hear about us, and subscribe so you keep up to date on new episodes. Also visit livingbrave.com if you want to connect with me and find out more about executive coaching, team effectiveness and changing culture. Oh, and of course you can buy my book Living Brave Leadership on Amazon. So on that note, see you soon.